Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Tabiti believes he can beat Andy Ruiz when he moves up to heavyweight.
What?
He was quoted as saying, Usyk is an Olympic gold medalist. He's a real good fighter. My thoughts on him being a heavyweight? I think it's going to be tough for him fighting those big guys like Joshua and Wilder. It could be tough, but then again, he's a good boxer. Has good craft, southpaw, so he can do some things in the division, 100%. That is definitely a fight I want to get when I become a heavyweight, without being asked. The 30-year-old also laid out his hit list for when he moves up in weight. I would like to fight Usyk, Andy Ruiz, we could fight Michael Hunter, Gerald Washington, Charles Martin, everybody. Just line them up, Tabiti explained. When asked by Ellerby to reveal his long-term and short-term plans, Tabiti made it clear that he first wants to take care of unfinished business in the cruiserweight division.
He better.
Short-term, I want to get a couple of belts at cruiserweight, so hopefully this is my last year. Then try to get a rematch with Dorticos and get that belt, then fight for the WBC belt, then go straight to heavyweight in a year and a half. We could fight Charles Martin right away, a Gerald Washington right away. I think I have the skills to fight Andy Ruiz. I think I can beat him.
Oh, that makes one of us.
Start off by saying that I think Andrew has the right idea here.
He does.
He's got to finish the unfinished business in the cruiserweight division before anything happens for him in the heavyweight division, as he hasn't done very much in the cruiserweight division. He has yet to have become a champion there. He had a very encouraging knockout win over Latif Coyote, but the Pfeiffer fight, a fight where I don't think Andrew Tabiti looked his best.
He did.
In hindsight, that Ruslan-Pfeiffer fight could be interpreted as a preview of what was to come, because in that fight, Andrew exhibited a lot of defensive prowess, but it was offense that he was missing. He had two guys in there doing a lot of clinching, getting a lot of nothing done. He wins that Pfeiffer fight, moves on from it, and finds himself so confronted with the hard-punching Junior Dorticos. And in that Dorticos fight, once again, Andrew exhibited defensive prowess, but he was lacking greatly in the offense department. He seemed largely overwhelmed by the aggressive approach from Junior Dorticos. We all know what happened. We all know how that fight ended. This was a step up in competition for Andrew, and he seemed largely unprepared for it. Like a deer in the headlights. So Andrew's short-term plan of finishing what is the unfinished business he has in the cruiserweight division, that really is the right course of action before dipping his toe in the pool of the heavyweight division. I mean, this mention of Andy Ruiz potentially fighting him, the idea that Andrew feels he's got what it takes to beat him. You'll excuse me for saying so, but I don't share that opinion.
I don't.
See nothing from Andrew Tabiti that indicates to me that he's ready for what the heavyweight division has to offer when he doesn't seem ready for what the cruiserweight division has to offer. At least he wasn't in that Junior Dorticos fight. And you know that Andrew, he hasn't had a fight since June of last year when he was brutally knocked out by Junior Dorticos. It's conceivable that it will be a year, over a year's time, once Andrew finally steps back into the squared circle. It's basically saying that he hasn't actually rebounded from that loss yet. And he's giving himself something like a year or a year and a half's time to accomplish these goals, to pick up world titles in the cruiserweight division. One must assess who those cruiserweight titleists are in order to gauge Andrew Tabiti's chances of accomplishing this goal in that amount of time. You've got Arsène Goulamarian of France holding the WBA, Lunga Makabu of the Democratic Republic of the Congo holding the WBC, Junior Dorticos, we all know, is holding the IBF. The WBO title is listed as being vacant. Both Krzysztof Glowacki and Lawrence Okoli, they happen to be in a pole position to fight for what is the vacant WBO title. And as we all know, the Ring Magazine belt is in possession of no one. I'll tell you that I don't think a year and a half is going to be enough time for Andrew Tabiti to accomplish this goal of picking up these world titles in this weight class. I can tell you that looks like it's going to take a little longer than that, and given who these world champions are, I'm not completely sure that Andrew's even ready for any of them. I'll tell you that Andrew Tabiti has a professional record of 17 wins and only 1 loss. And that in mind, I don't think he should be setting his sights on moving up to the heavyweight division anytime in the near future, if at all. Because Andrew Tabiti doesn't have the adequate physical dimensions for today's heavyweight division of lumbering lummoxes. He's a very modest 6'1" with a 76-inch wingspan. Just doesn't look like he's got the frame to bang with the big boys.
At heavyweight.
What's the average height of a heavyweight these days? 6'5"?
Yeah.
Andrew really would be on the smaller end of the spectrum. I'm not sure that he's adequately suited to campaign in this weight class, having proven so little in the cruiserweight division. To surmise my thoughts on these short-term and long-term plans that Andrew has, I definitely think he needs to finish the unfinished business in the cruiserweight division, but I'm not sure he's ever going to be ready for the upper crust, the upper echelon fighters at heavyweight. Oh, maybe you can go in there with an Usyk and a Michael Hunter, cruiserweights like yourself that integrated themselves into that weight class. But as far as these career heavyweights, your Tyson Fury, your Anthony Joshua, your Deontay Wilder, your Andy Ruiz, your Dillian White, I can't give Andrew any kinds of chances anytime in the near future against those fighters. I don't see it.
I don't think I ever will.
I mean, I know there's a lot more money in the heavyweight division. It certainly is one of the more glamorous weight classes as far as weight classes in the sport of boxing go, whereas cruiserweight is often referred to as the forgotten division, the forgotten weight class. And that might be why Andrew looks at moving up to the heavyweight division as some form of an eventuality. But I don't know that he's ever going to be ready for what that division has to offer in terms of world champions, top contenders, and what prospects are climbing up the ranks. I can't give Andrew any kind of real odds to make so much as a dent in that weight class. But, you know, that's what his plans are, and we'll see how it all pans out. Wanted my opinion here, so I'll assume that you did. I'll assume that you do. I don't know that Andrew's ever going to be ready to campaign as a heavyweight. In other news, Josh Warrington had this to say. He says, I want Shakur Stevenson sooner than later. IBF featherweight champion Josh Warrington is not impressed with the level of competition that Shakur Stevenson has beaten. Stevenson, who holds the WBO's world title, has been itching to fight Warrington in a high-stakes unification. Warrington appears to be heading in the direction of a clash with WBA champion Sue Can. He does not believe Stevenson has faced a high level of competition and felt the Olympian's opponents were tailor-made for him. I'm open to that fight, Warrington told the boxing show on Sky Sports. I've made it clear that I'm happy to fight any of the other champions. I want their names on my CV. Stevenson is a talent. He's young, a former Olympian. He has a lot of people around him building him up. He's looked good in all of his fights so far. Everyone he's boxed has been tailor-made for him. He hasn't boxed someone who will close him down with educated pressure. People approach him in straight lines. I'm not saying he wouldn't be a tough fight, but he hasn't been in deep water situations. He talks confidently about coming over to the UK and fighting me in my backyard, but he hasn't been in those kinds of scenarios. I don't worry about him getting better and better. Some people peak early. He's a big featherweight. I want to fight him sooner rather than later, not because I'm worried about him improving, but he's mentioned that he wants to move up divisions. I want to keep fighting the big names. Keep proving people wrong. People think Stevenson will give Josh a good fight. He's a tricky southpaw. Let me have that challenge. Sadly, I don't think that will ever happen, at least anytime in the near future. Sadly, I think the ship has sailed for what was to be Warrington versus Stevenson, at least for now, as Top Rank's Carl Moretti has already gone on to say that Shakur Stevenson could be back in action as soon as June. And when he returns, it won't be at 126. It'll be in a 10-round non-title fight at the prescribed weight of 130 pounds. I'll tell you that I don't think that Josh Warrington is wrong in his assessment of Shakur Stevenson's quality of competition so far. I'll tell you that Shakur has not yet had those kinds of matchups, those kinds of fights, to where a fighter's intestinal fortitude is tested. Shakur has fought the kind of opponents you expect a guy to fight. When he's only 13-0, 22 years old. That's not a knock on Shakur. I'm not slighting him. I'm just being honest that Shakur's quality of competition is everything that you would expect it to be from someone in his position. He's only 22 years old. He's only had 13 professional fights. I would hardly expect that Shakur, at this stage in his career, has fought all of the killers, elephants, lions, and gorillas so soon in his career. It's just not realistic. Shakur Stevenson has not yet had the opportunity to have those kinds of fights because he's very much in the beginning stages of his career. Thus, I agree with Josh Warrington that Shakur hasn't been in those high-level fights, those high-level situations. However, at this point, it's much ado about nothing, as Shakur very much appears to be moving up into the 130-pound division, and even if he weren't moving up into the 130-pound division, even if his very next fight were going to be at 126, guess what?
What?
Josh Warrington's supposed to be fighting Kansu anyway. That was the plan for what was to be Josh Warrington's very next fight. What was to be a unification match with Kansu, the WBA's super featherweight champion. I think that Shakur has outgrown the featherweight division. He's a very young kid. His body's getting bigger. He's getting older. He's outgrown the weight class. It's nobody's fault. He was always on borrowed time at 126 pounds. These things happen. I don't blame Josh any more than I blame Shakur for the fight not happening, as
They both won it.
I don't think for a second that either of these two fighters are afraid of each other. Shakur is young and brash and eager to prove himself, and Josh Warrington is proven, established.
He is.
The track record speaks for itself. There are any number of reasons why a fight might not happen, you know. Sometimes it is that one fighter and his team are circumventing another fighter for fear of taking a loss. Other times it just boils down to politics.
Yes, sometimes.
Separate teams on separate sides of streets that are unwilling to work with each other. And other times, chalk it up to bad timing. And I think that's what happened here, that Shakur Stevenson's stay in the featherweight division was never going to be very long. Perhaps if he had more time, perhaps if he could make the weight comfortably, which I really think is at the root of the problem, that he's outgrown 126 pounds. And maybe somewhere down the line we might have seen this fight materialize. But as it stands, it does appear that it's a little too late to talk about what could have been Warrington versus Stevenson. So while there may still be some residual enthusiasm from the IBF champion Josh Warrington, it's a day late and a dollar short. Doesn't look like this fight is happening anytime in the near future, if at all. And finally, Ryan Garcia had this to say about Gervonta Davis. He says he sees Gervonta as Sonny Liston. He doesn't really love boxing. He loves the money. He was quoted as saying, "I'm ready for it, no matter who it is. Teofimo, Devin, Gervonta," Garcia said. "But my personal opinion, what I really want to do, I really want to fight Gervonta Davis. You want to know why? I see him as Sonny Liston. He doesn't really love boxing. I see that he loves the money, so he don't need to be a world champion. I'm like Muhammad Ali. I need to be world champion. He can't represent it like me, so that's my attitude coming into it, and I'm ready to prove those words." There are certain aspects of Ryan Garcia's parallel between Sonny Liston and Gervonta Davis that I agree with, and some that I don't. I don't think that Gervonta Davis is, to either 130 or 135 pounds, what Sonny Liston was to the heavyweight division. I mean, he was a much more established guy in his time than Gervonta Davis currently is in either of those weight classes. However, what rings true about Ryan Garcia's parallel, his contrast between those two fighters, is the dedication, or the lack thereof, and what it is that actually motivates Gervonta Davis. Is it really the love of boxing, or is it something else? I can tell you that I happen to agree with what Ryan is saying. I don't look at Gervonta Davis as a fighter who's dedicated to his craft, and that is indicative in how he treats himself between fights. He lets himself go. He balloons in weight. This isn't something you could accuse his mentor of, Floyd Mayweather Jr. To that fighter, preparation was key. You'd never see Floyd out of shape,
Wouldn't happen.
ballooning in weight between fights. Floyd Mayweather's reputation was the reputation of a man who is ever ready, a gym rat,
That's what he was.
often found being fighting fit between fights, whereas for Gervonta, that's really not the case. Look, I understand that this is pugilism. I understand that this is prize fighting, and for a prize fighter, the prizes have a lot to do with why you're doing what you do. But beyond that,
Is it just money?
there's lots of ways to get your money. You can be a lawyer, a doctor, a basketball player, a football player.
An artist?
There has to be something more than just the pursuit of dollars that motivates a fighter. There has to be a desire to be the best at what you do. There has to be a genuine desire to excel, to hone your craft, perfect it, dedicate yourself to it.
There has to be.
As the sport of boxing, as a profession, for what is a professional fighter, is not the kind of profession that you can approach half-heartedly. You have to want to be there. It can't just be about the prizes. When it comes to Gervonta Davis, the fighter, and those who handle that fighter's career, they seem more concerned with branding him as some kind of a superstar as opposed to an elite level fighter.
He's a nice young man, an outstanding fighter. Wish him continued success, but what he's doing don't have nothing to do with what we're doing.
Do you think their paths are going to cross though? Do you
if he's around, if the two meet, great. If they don't, it's okay. Gervonta Davis will be the biggest star in all of boxing.
That was Leonard Ellerbe fielding questions in reference to a potential Vasyl Lomachenko versus Gervonta Davis match, and that interview is from 2 years ago. A testament to how long this has been going on, a testament to what exactly is it that Leonard and the people over there at the TMT are grooming Gervonta Davis to be. Are they grooming him to be an elite level fighter? Are they grooming him to be an elite level world champion? Or are they grooming him to be something else?
So you said a few times now that your goal is to make Gervonta Davis the biggest star in the sport. So
that's Floyd's objective and my objective.
So your objective
and star power has nothing to do. See, people get the two mixed up. You can be the best fighter.
Well, that's the point.
You can be the best fighter. But you can be the biggest star.
So you have no intentions on proving that Gervonta Davis may be the best fighter. You more want him to be the biggest star because, for instance, you guys don't like to acknowledge Tevin Farmer, but Tevin Farmer is in the game to be the best fighter.
Leonard was asked about potential matchups for Gervonta Davis with several of the best fighters that were out there at that time, 2 years ago. Since then, not a single one of those fights has materialized. So one is left to wonder, what exactly are the people over there at the TMT grooming Gervonta Davis to be? Are they grooming him to be an elite level fighter, an elite level champion,
Or something else.
Of course, I'll tell you something. There's no way that you guys are grooming this kid to be the next generation's pound for pound elite level fighter, elite level champion, and take these kinds of shortcuts to where you're skirting around most of an entire weight class.
Weight classes.
Keeping Gervonta Davis out of the kind of fights he needs to really grow as a fighter. There's no way you can be doing this with the intention of making him an elite level fighter, a pound for pound fighter. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't.
There are no shortcuts.
There aren't.
Gervonta Davis's campaign at 130 pounds was a sheltered campaign. He didn't unify with any of the champions that were there, in spite of how many champions were there. Vasyl Lomachenko and Tevin Farmer among them. To surmise my thoughts on Ryan Garcia's comments, his assessment of Gervonta Davis as a fighter, that he's not in love with boxing, he's not in love with his craft, he's in love with money, he's in love with stardom. And yes, there is a distinction. To surmise my thoughts, Ryan Garcia is spot on. They're not grooming Gervonta Davis to be, the next generation's pound for pound elite level fighter. They're grooming him to be something else entirely, and that may backfire very soon.